The coach said Lane is still in the concussion protocol, but Lane said, yeah, get ready to watch me play on Sunday. I'm going to be good to go by then. Mac guy, McMullen McDonald, hanging with you here on Birds 365. Appreciate your stream on in. I don't think I've asked you to ask the peeps to do what we ask them to do in a while, Johnny Mac. What do we need everybody tuned in?
Gotta like it. We got 486. We've been up over 500 on Robert Quinn Day live streamers. So thanks to everyone listening. But like, share, and subscribe while you're here.
Show a little love to your Mac and Mac buddies. All right. One other thing from yesterday, and I did see the snapshot you took, some power players getting around and about yesterday. In that group was Lane Johnson. The coach said Lane is still in the concussion protocol, but Lane said, yeah, get ready to watch me play on Sunday. I'm going to be good to go by then. You get that from time to time. Players might be overstating their availability. Why? Because they're warriors. That's what they do. Lane Johnson's a warrior. So, of course, he's going to tell you he's going to be good to go. Weighing what the coach was saying and the player was saying, what's your best guess scenario on Lane's availability for Sunday?
He's going to play. He's in the protocol because of the timing, because they had the bye week, so nobody does anything, and there's no practice, so there's no reason. But he was already at practice in a limited fashion, which indicates he's in the final phase of the protocol on a Wednesday. So that's very good indication. And maybe it would be different in Miami here. Yeah, he's going to play. He's going to play on Sunday. Don't worry about
it. That's funny that you say that, because and I understand where you're coming from, and you're probably right. It shouldn't be.
No,
Miami should be the same as Philadelphia, which should be the same as Denver, which should be the same as LA, which should be the same as Minnesota. There should be no difference whatsoever with the 32 teams and how they handle concussion protocols. It's supposed to be a standard across the board way of deciding things, but different teams do it differently or expected different things.
You're preaching to the choir, Jody. That Dolphins thing, I've been talking about it for weeks. It's absurd. It's absurd. And it's not the Dolphins, it's the league, because there's a higher profile because of what went on. The most laughable part of all, well, there's two ones that no matter how many people say it, Tua Tagovailoa did not get diagnosed with 2 concussions. One. And that was the second one that you think he had a concussion. Well, he didn't, according to the neurologist, who I'm going to rely on. Call me crazy, but I'm going to rely on them. Now, until somebody says, oh, no, they wanted Tua to play. They wanted the Dolphins to win. If anybody has that smoking gun, I'll reevaluate my position. Until that point, I'm not going to reevaluate it and listen to some know nothing on Twitter over the neurologist. All right, that's number one. Number two was even worse, the Teddy Bridgewater situation when Skylar Thompson got hurt. What game was that? Skylar Thompson started
a week and a half ago.
Yeah. And Teddy Bridgewater was cleared from his concussion, which was officially diagnosed, but they wouldn't start him because of what went on. And then the other guy got hurt, and he had to play anyway.
And he goes in.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
It's absurd, Jody. It's absurd.
Well, hopefully for the Dolphins' sake, because that's my pick to be in the Super Bowl with the Eagles this year. They all have cleared concussion protocol going forward. Tua played this past week. Good enough to win. Wasn't great. But I didn't think he needed to be great. He just needed to come back. And
he had some rust as well because he's been out so long. Yeah.
But he was good enough to find a way to win. And I thought that was the most important thing for the Dolphins. All right. So the Steelers come to town this week here in Philadelphia. We'll give you more on the game coming up. Dave Zingaro is going to join us. We're certainly going to get his Robert Quinn thoughts, but also the matchup with the Eagles. This weekend, the other two teams at the top of the NFC East right now, playoffs were to end. certainly players would start. Eagles would be the number 1 seed, but the Giants would be in via wild card, and the Cowboys would be in via wild card. 3 teams from the NFC East. God, what kind of money you could have made if you could have made that bet. 3 NFC East teams in the playoffs before the year started. The odds would have been, that would have been astronomical, but that's the case as of right now. The Cowboys host the Bears, and the Bears will be without Robert Quinn because he's going to be here in Philadelphia. But Robert Quinn wasn't doing a whole hell of a lot for Chicago anyway. Wasn't making much of a difference. He had 8 tackles in 7 games. That really is. You have to go back and break down the game film, and I'll take the reporter's words on it that he was double teamed as much as anybody in the National Football League. Well, that's why his numbers were minuscule. But I don't know if taking Robert Quinn out of their lineup at this time makes them that much lesser a defense. They played quite well in their last game against New England. Justin Fields had one of his best games, if not his best game as a pro. Bears got any chance to go down to Dallas, pull a little bit of an upset, Johnny Mac? They walked into New England and blew the Patriots off the field by 20 points.
I don't think so. When you talk about, we talked about Ryan Poles a little bit and the trade from his perspective, which makes some sense. And that's what he said. But, the calendar is what the calendar is, right? The trade deadline's November 1st. Because the NFC is so terrible as a whole, I believe the Bears are a half game out of a wild card spot right now. The Chicago Bears. But so the bad part of that trade is the message it sends to the locker room. Now, I always say self-evaluation is the toughest thing to do. So I give Brian Poles credit for that. His team stinks. He knows his team stinks. He knows his team's not making playoffs. So from his perspective, you make the deal. But that sends a bad message to a locker room fighting to win games, coming off a win against New England, going into Dallas. So, yeah, that sends a very bad message to the locker room but he had to do it. And those are the difficult decisions you have to make.
Here's where I agree with you on this, because it cuts both ways. That the Eagles went out and added a guy who can contribute for them. We'll see how much it is. Could be gigantic, could be solid, could be next to nothing. But they did a deal. They made a move. They traded for a guy with a hell of a career resume. And what kind of an effect does it have on the rest of the team? Do the guys go, yeah, they really believe in us? They went out and got a guy like Robert Quinn. This shows how committed the organization is. I think people overstate and overrate what it does to the mindset of a team. As a matter of fact, I think the point that you were just making, I think it actually shows more on the downside, on the negative side, when a guy like Robert Quinn, who, didn't have much of a season, but had 18 and a half sacks last year, and a whole bunch of the Bears players who were there last year who are still there this year go, oh, yeah, they got a lot of confidence in us. They're trading a guy who's on the team for a future draft pick. Yeah. Oh, they think a lot of our chances to be able to get there.
And they're only a half game out, and they just came off their biggest win of the season. And you just saw Roquan Smith. You saw it live. He got asked on the podium yesterday in Chicago about the trade, and he broke down. Yeah. That's how much respect he had for Robert Quinn, and he's their best defensive player, Roquan Smith. So, I mean, you're signaling to your locker room, we don't believe in you. And by the way, I think Ryan Poles is right. That's the difficult part of the job. They're not going to make the playoffs, even though they're a half game out. They weren't going to make the playoffs with Robert Quinn. They're certainly not going to make the playoffs without Robert Quinn. He knows that, and he made the difficult decision. You have to pull the trigger when you have to pull the trigger, because the deadline is what the deadline is. You'd prefer to wait until you're completely out of it. But the NFC is so bad, you're not going to be completely out of it. So it's a difficult decision. But it has an impact on the locker room, because you make that clear. Nick Sirianni, like slapping at the table, we don't believe in you, is basically what Ryan Poles said.
And oh, by the way, I think the timing of the trade tells you something as well. Because what happens if they do go in and beat Dallas this week and they hadn't made the trade yet? Now the general manager's got to pull the trigger on a deal because Howie Roseman still wants the player. And now he's got to put up with even more questions. Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah,
whoa, whoa. Check the
yeah,
standings. We're
yeah.
still in it. What the hell are you doing trading one of our guys? We've got a chance to make the playoffs. So I think they didn't even want to wait till next week to do the deal. I think they wanted to do it ahead of time because it could have looked even worse if they went ahead and beat the Cowboys, which, even without Robert Quinn, even without a couple of the guys being completely motivated, maybe a little more ticked off than focused, I think they got a chance going and winning Dallas. I do. I think that their defense with Robert Quinn, but he wasn't necessarily the guy or the reason why he was improving. It seemed like they had Fields more up to speed, more in step with what the offensive coordinator wanted on Monday night. I think the Bears have a chance to go in Dallas and win.
Well, it is the NFL. I think, Jimmy had a great line yesterday. Jimmy Kempski. It's not, Clemson scheduling Wofford, and I kind of did it with Pittsburgh as well. Pittsburgh, if Najee Harris comes in, runs for 175, and Cam Hayward wrecks the game. I mean, Micah Fitzpatrick gets a couple turnovers. They have really good players. It isn't Wofford. There's no Woffords in the NFL. And Chicago's in that category as well. I mean, I like Dallas's defense. I think their defense is legit. I think it's really as legit as you can be in the modern NFL. I think they're really good defensively. Offensively, they're not going to scare anybody, especially with Dak Prescott still getting his rust off.
And oh, by the way, Zeke might not play this week.
Yeah,
and they've really made that Pollard Zeke thing work, alternating back and forth. Both talented players, different kind of skill sets. At least as per what I read this morning, he's questionable, if not doubtful, for the game on Sunday.
Yeah, I think they're going to. You mentioned Fields. I mean, I've criticized their coaching staff, and hopefully they're more malleable and trying to build things around Justin Fields. But early in the season, they were just, they hired a scheme, right? They made the old mistake. They hired a scheme and they said, all right, you fit in this scheme and it should be the opposite. Hopefully they're figuring that out. But I still think there's going to be growing pains. And you don't fix growing pains against maybe the best defense. You do that against some of the worst defenses. So and then there's the consistency factor of young players who struggle. They're probably not going to play well consistently. So coming off a good game, expect a bad game.
Yeah, I don't. I expect a good game. And oh, by the way, Cowboys almost as big a favorite over the Bears as the Eagles are over the Steelers. Eagles are 10.5. The Cowboys are 9.5 down in Dallas against the Bears. I can tell you right now, I'm taking the 9.5 with Chicago. All right. Other game, the Eagle fans should have eyes on be the late afternoon game. So after the Eagles finish up with the Steelers, you can turn your attention to Giants Seahawks in Seattle.
Yeah, how about that? By the way, Jody, I believe, I have to look. The 49ers are playing the Rams at 4:25. Who would have thought the Giants at the Seahawks would be the bigger 4:25 game, at least at this stage? And that's, 6-1 against the leaders of the NFC West. That's the bigger game, technically.
Let me restate this, and I know some people really get annoyed by this, which I don't understand their annoyance level. The whole if the playoffs were to start today. I know they're not starting today. It's just an attempt to put something into a context or a focus. If the playoffs were to start today, both the Giants and the Seahawks would be in. Now, as much as John and I have stated, we're pretty surprised that the Giants are 6-1 at this stage, kind of caught us off guard. Even more so the Seahawks. Are you kidding me? I thought they were vying for the number one pick of the draft.
Yeah.
That, okay, Geno Smith, You can clipboard count. You can hold the quarterback for all 17 games if you want. We know they're going to have another quarterback next year. Oh, no. Geno Smith has been one of the best quarterbacks in the National Football League so far this year. So the Giants are going to get tested this week, too. On the road in Seattle, maybe surprisingly. Giants are surprisingly 6-1. Well, for me, the Seahawks are surprisingly 4-3. I think they got their work cut out for them on Sunday.
Yeah, and that is a very difficult place to play, Seattle. In general, not only do you have the travel, but it's just one of the loudest buildings in the NFL. Now, you thought maybe in a bad team it'd be a little bit easier this year, but they're a good team, so those fans are going to show up like they always do. Really tough place to win. So it is going to be a tough test for the Giants. And Brian Daboll's been rolling sevens, as we said. I mean, they're winning games, and there's something to that. I mean, I constantly talk about the Giants in Minnesota, but there's something to winning games in this league. So many games are close, and that's a trait. And when you're successful in that, and it might just last for a season because you don't have tremendous talent, but we're going to start having, well, not you, but me. I'm going to start giving the Giants a little bit more credit because they keep winning games. And
I'd moved them up already, not through the roof. It's not like, oh my God, Giants are going to the Super Bowl. I'm giving a little bit more credit than you are, but not a whole hell of a lot more. Because I'm still surprised that the Giants are 6-1. I don't love their roster, but they have a winning attitude and just belief and a winning attitude in these games. And it seems like every Giant game. Well, I think every game they played this year has been decided in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the Giants have had to rally, come from behind. That's a pretty good trait to have, to be able to come from behind with a solid, not spectacular type roster. That is belief in themselves and belief in their coaching staff.
Yeah, and same thing with Seattle to a lesser degree, but you know Geno Smith well from his time with the Jets.
Shocking the snot out of me.
Yeah, I mean he's playing well. He's not. It's not about him sort of we talked about Cooper Rush being a game manager when he was in production. Geno's playing well. Not I'll have to look at the numbers, but I know at one point, Pro Football Focus earlier in the season had him number one in the entire NFL. Now he hasn't kept up that pace, but that gives you an indication of how well he's been playing. It's not just they're winning games despite Geno Smith. Right now he's number 4.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's one spot ahead of Jalen Hurts, who's number 2 in the MVP race. So that's how well Geno Smith has been playing.
And I didn't see it coming, but they too have a big question mark for this Sunday. Looks like Metcalf's going to be out. He got hurt in last week's game. And Lockett, I think, missed practice yesterday. So they need who stepped up big for them? You were covering the team when he was here. I gave him a game ball on CBS Sports on Sunday on my late afternoon show with Zach Gelb. Marquise Goodwin made a couple big catches when Metcalf went out the other day.
I was here when he was here, but he was never here.
Right.
Marquise Goodwin never showed up to Philadelphia. That was the pandemic. The Eagles made the trade. They were bringing him. Never showed up to Philadelphia. Not one day took a step in the facility. So he was here in spirit only.
Name and spirit, but never literally in the Eagles facilities. But damn, if he didn't stick around, I thought he was done when that happened. As a matter of fact, because
he was one of the guys who opted out because he had some kind of family issue. I think one of his kids had some. So there was a lot of concern. So the Eagles traded for him. It wasn't like he was not going to show up, but then the pandemic happened and he opted out of the entire season. Tone said he had a newborn, and he just had a lot of concerns about being around. And a lot of people were scared about COVID at that point, and he opted out. And then the next season came, and the Eagles voided the trade. Never spent a day in Philadelphia. Yeah.
Right, and ended up going back to San Francisco. But I thought that because he was a guy whose game was completely and totally built on speed,
Yeah. He was
Olympic
Devin
type,
Allen before Devin Allen.
right, Olympic type sprinter and hurdler. So I thought that he would be hard pressed to get back into the league to merit a spot. Yeah, yes. Moved on from San Francisco to Seattle, caught 2 touchdown passes last week. I think his wife lost 2 different babies prior to birth, stillborns and the like. So had
Yeah.
some very tough times. And sure enough, they finally did carry their newborn during the pandemic is when he actually had his first child. So kind of guy that you wanted to root for. And I saw that he got 2 touchdowns filling in for Metcalf. I said, what the hell? Let's give him a game by. He wasn't one of the top 4 players in the NFL, but because it was a good story, I said, let's go ahead and give him a game ball. But he might have to do it again this week if Seattle is down wide receivers for this upcoming week. All right, other games around the National Football League. You can't move off the NFC East. It seems like when you're an Eagles fan, it all revolves around the NFC East. Taylor Heineke to the rescue again in Washington, Johnny Mac. No, you don't believe in the Giants. Do you believe in Taylor Heineke?
Yeah, why not? Taylor Heineke against Sam Ellinger. I'll go Taylor Heineke in that matchup of heavyweight quarterbacks. Yeah, I think Washington is better with Taylor Heineke than Carson
So do
Wentz.
I.
I just do. I use that term plucky, and he doesn't have a lot of traits you generally look for when you talk about great NFL quarterbacks, but I think he's a good backup. I think he makes things more difficult on the opposing teams. He's not going to make nearly as many mistakes. Game manager, basically, who can make a play with his legs occasionally. Yeah, I think Washington is more dangerous with Taylor Heineke.
It's funny, you know who he reminds me of? A guy he was competing with just 2 years ago, Alex Smith. That Alex Smith didn't have the trace that you wanted from a franchise core. Drop back, cock it off the ear, zip it 20 yards on a line to a wide receiver doing the toe tap special on the side. No, he's never doing that. But Alex Smith never did that either. And Alex Smith won a lot of football games.
Alex Smith won a ton of football. I would say, Alex Smith was the number 1 pick in the draft. So he had some traits at one point in his career. But, Taylor Heineke was undrafted out of, I believe, Old Dominion. I believe he was a Travis
ODU or VCU. I get those two confused.
I believe it was Old Dominion.
Old Dominion.
I'll double check that. So, yeah, he's he's small. He's too short. Supposedly, he doesn't have great arm strength. He's more athletic than people realize. He can do some things with his legs. I like him as a backup quarterback. Now, I don't love him as a starting quarterback, but look, Carson is. I don't think he's a starting quarterback in this league any longer, and I think he keeps proving that.
And the maybe even more interesting part, we got Dave Zingaro joining us in just a couple of minutes here. What the hell are the Colts doing?
I don't know.
Frank Reich. Oh, the Eagles won the Super Bowl because of Frank Reich. He went to Indianapolis, made the playoffs a couple of times. The last couple of years have been a stone cold mess in Indianapolis, and they're at 3-1, so they're still in the mix. I'm not writing them off, but they're pulling the plug on Matt Ryan already.
Yeah,
and I've watched a couple of their games.
By the way, Taylor Heineke, real quick, is Old Dominion.
Old Dominion
Monarchs. But with Andrew Luck's retirement, you look back on that devastated that franchise. I mean, they just can't get it right. Now, they did have Phillip Rivers for the 1 year, who played very well that 1 year. And Nick Sirianni won't stop talking about it. Shane Steichen, they love that guy so much. But he retired, and it was the end of his career. And they tried to do it again with Matt Ryan. At some point, I guess you got to do what Pittsburgh's doing, what Chicago's doing, and just bite the bullet and try to develop somebody. And what the Eagles did, really, with
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts.
Uh, Carson Wentz kind of held the gun to the head, but they
Yeah,
did. Doug pulled him before he knew that Carson was going to demand a trade going out of town. So exactly right. Give Doug Peterson credit.
yeah. I mean, they just need to bite the bullet, and
But are they doing that with Sam Ellinger?
I don't think so. But they're going to bring somebody up. I don't think he has that kind of upside, but we'll see. I don't know. I don't
Neither,
know what they're doing.
neither do I.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, maybe the problem in Indianapolis the last 2 years is they don't have Nick Sirianni anymore.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. You could certainly make that correlation, especially what you see what Nick has done here. They certainly haven't been the same. It's a fair point.
He is John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. Mac and Mac guy is going to talk to Dave Zingaro. He's coming up next. Mr. NBC Sports Philly on the Eagles. Going to join us here on Birds 365.